So today I'm going to analyze the Tale of Genji as my primary source. And first and foremost, I'll be talking about its historical context. So the Tale of Genji was written during 11th century Japan. And this period was called the Heian period. And it was also characterized by the decline of the Tang dynasty in China. So one observes sort of a shift away from like Chinese influences in Japanese literature, literary art, religion, culture, etc. And Japan was becoming increasingly more nationalistic and isolated. And this period was also characterized by peacefulness. And this lack of political turmoil sort of allowed art and literature in Japan to flourish. And in a lot of works from this time, such as Tale of Genji, one observes sort of a lack of mention of war, aggressiveness, conflict, etc. But it was mostly centered around romance, love, and poetry. And during this period, men who are considered to be attractive, such as Genji himself, or like sort of the ideal form of men and masculinity, is portrayed as being sensitive, creative, and cultured. And so culture was sort of equated to power during this period because it allows them to sort of establish network and have access to political influences. Another notable characteristic of this work and also this period was the widespread influence of Buddhism. And we see sort of a lot of allusion or mention of Buddhist themes, rites, and ideas within the Tale of Genji. So basically going off of that, one of the most important sort of characteristic of the Tale of Genji is sort of the glorification of sorrow. For instance, the tragic life of Murasaki, which is one of the main characters in the Tale of Genji, who was also Genji's wife, sort of her death was depicted as something that was tragic but beautiful at the same time. And usually the author uses a lot of very beautiful scenic imagery to sort of depict the sad or tragic state of mind of its characters. And there were a lot of mention of Buddhist rites, and like Genji consulted Buddhist monks on multiple occasions for enlightenment. And in the Tale of Genji, there was this idea that was tied into sort of the plot itself, is that romance and living is inevitable, and love or romance lead to suffering. In other words, living and suffering are two things that are inevitable in life, because the suffering of women, in, at least according to the Tale of Genji, are caused by men, and men suffer due to societal pressure and guilt. But at the same time, women in the court use men as tools to like advance within the societal ladder. So take Genji, for instance, like even though he is sort of this playboy that has no real job, he was born to the royal family, and he basically goes on from like banquet to banquet, romantic escapades to romantic escapades on a daily basis. He's still like very unhappy most of the time due to the fact that he was troubled by guilt and sort of trying to find love and sort of repair his I guess like childhood loss of his mother, etc. And eventually this reincarnation of Genji as his grandson also ties back to sort of, Buddhist ideals of reincarnation, etc. So if we look at like this panel that was painted, that was sort of inspired by a scene in the Tale of Genji, I think this is supposed to be like a funeral rite. But at the back over here, you see a lot of like Buddhist monks, and they're also like standing over here. And these stuff are also like something that was like used in like Buddhist worship, I suppose. So this is sort of an evidence to the fact that like Buddhism and Buddhist themes are very vividly present within the Tale of Genji. And another aspect that is very interesting within the Tale of Genji, it's sort of its timelessness and its modernity. So even though the main character in the Tale of Genji is, well, Genji, like a male character, the female characters in the Tale of Genji are depicted as very, I guess, complex, independent, and very smart, and like even like calculated in some instances. So, and I think this this largely has to do with the fact that the narrator herself is a woman. And so I guess she was able to sort of put a lot of what she felt and what she observed in Japanese women in the court and put that in her novel. So I guess there's a really like sense of like realism with how she depicted sort of the complex psychology of the woman and the other characters. And another aspect that is very interesting about the novel is its obscurity. And by that, I sort of mean like the language itself. So for instance, she never like detailedly depicted any like romantic scenes, but rather she would sort of allude to it by talking about like the scene or like what is going on in the environment instead of how sort of the characters are interacting. So it is within these like subtle clues that sort of one can find out what was happening in the novel. So the Tale of Genji has a very profound influence on Japanese art, drama, and national identity. So as we have seen with a lot of sort of the images that I inserted into these slides, most of them are sort of like panels that were like painted years later. And it also inspired a lot of like Japanese drama. And I think during the 20th century, there were a lot of scholars who looked back onto the Tale of Genji sort of as a marker of Japanese identity. And I think it's sort of universal themes that allowed it to be a timeless classic. And that is all for this presentation. Thank you.